Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this latest installment in the Octopart Edge webinar series. I am Zach Peterson, and this webinar is all about finding replacement parts efficiently. We're going to go over some strategies and some workflows to do exactly as the title says, find some replacement parts for designs. So first, let's just briefly look at the agenda. First, we want to run over some aspects of when you need to replace parts or which parts might need to be replaced in a design. And we'll look at how you can use the BOM tool for that. We'll also look at some of the filters and part specifications views that can be used to find replacement parts when some of the other tools don't yield the results that you need, or when, for example, you need to find a part because you need an alternative package or footprint, some of those types of issues. So we'll cover all of that in this webinar. So first, I want to look at some of the most common reasons that designers may need to replace parts. This could occur in a design that has already been completed and is being prepared for fabrication. Sometimes it happens after fabrication but before assembly, and sometimes it happens on the front end when you're still working on your schematics. I think one of the most common reasons that someone needs to replace a part is because, of course, a part goes out of stock with your preferred or your approved vendors. Another big one can be an unexpected price change. Typically at low volume, this is not a big deal, but this can, of course, be a large deal at high volume because an unexpected price change could add up to a large change in cost for a production run. Price changes can also happen when parts go out of stock because you might also be forced into using a broker, and of course, the broker could charge a much higher price. Another instance is when a part goes obsolete or end of life, and of course, the obsolete part either becomes unavailable or maybe it is available, but it's not going to last for the entire life cycle of your product. And so, of course, you need to replace that obsolete or end of life part. One thing that sometimes happens with BOMs, sometimes when you get a BOM from a contractor, is that some of the parts in the BOM may have an incomplete part number or just a totally wrong part number. Another one is when you have an incorrect footprint in the PCB layout or when your CAD data has no footprint at all. And then the one that's always fun, in my opinion, is when you have a last minute specification change and you have to very quickly make a change to the design before getting into manufacturing. So there are some solutions in Octopart for each of these different areas. Octopart's tools offer some different approaches for each of these situations. So for example, with the out of stock issue, you can, for example, use partial part number searches or specification searches to find a part within the same part family or a part from a different vendor. Price changes, of course, you could also use the partial part number search, specification search if you want to totally different part. You could also just search that part number and look through the approved vendor list. Life cycle changes, my favorite is the BOM tool, and I'll show you some examples of where that arises. The alternate parts view is also very useful. For the incomplete PN or wrong PN, I think the availability or specification search inside of the main search window in Octopart is most effective. And then here with an incorrect footprint or no footprint, specification search on package, I think is most effective. And then the last minute spec change is kind of a wild card, and really the specification that you need to search is what matters. So using the specification search with the filter is going to be the fastest way to find a part that's going to meet this last minute spec change. So first, let's jump into price and inventory changes. So I think these are most commonly noticed when you're creating an order with a distributor. Another option is when you're scanning the BOM. So for example, with the BOM tool will pull in all of the price and inventory data from your preferred distributor list, and you'll be able to see it in one place. And that's the fastest way to notice a significant price change. There are also some third-party supply chain platforms that pull Octopart's data. And by leveraging Octopart's data, they can essentially show you the same thing that you would see in the BOM tool. And from there, you could also notice a price or an inventory change. So I think the parts availability view is very useful to sort and find new sources if there is a price and inventory change. You can then use the other search filters to find a related part that's going to meet your price and inventory targets. So in the availability view, I'm showing here an example with LM358. And here in the availability view, you may notice that, for example, your preferred amount you have a price increase that is just too large. You can already see from this availability view that there are some other options that are going to have a significantly lower price. You have options here from Rochester Electronics, but you can also see that Texas Instruments can also sell that part directly, and you can just buy directly from them. Sometimes this table can get very large with the number of preferred distributors, and so you have here some options to sort on price using the up and down arrows here next to each of these price breaks. Here you can see with the sort and option, we have a sort by price break, but we can also sort by stock. So this is very useful because, of course, sometimes you're doing a high volume run, or you want to make sure that you can procure for production over an extended period of time. And so sorting by stock is very useful to help you plan out where you're going to purchase those parts and make sure that you hit your production targets and your budget. Now, if you go onto a parts page for one of these results and looking at the list of authorized and non-authorized distributors, what you'll see here in the upper right portion of that view is a link that says see all price breaks. Now from here, you can get much more granular on pricing, and you can see that the price breaks are not broken down in multiples of 10. They're actually broken down in much smaller quantities, as you can see in this table. And you can sort on all of those quantities as well. So again, you can get much more granular and really find some significant cost savings by using this tool. So now let's suppose you still can't find a part that's going to be acceptable within your specification and your cost or your inventory availability. One option is to use a partial part number search. So with the partial part number search, all I'm typing in here in the search box is LM358. And of course here, it's bringing up all of the different LM358 components across all distributors and across all manufacturers. You can see here that in this specifications view, we have options to sort and filter by, for example, price. You can see that's here in the first column. We also have options to sort by life cycle status here, active or in production. And then there are other specifications that you can use to sort and filter these parts to narrow down to something that's going to meet your spec, including your price spec. There's also a currency option here. So if you aren't buying in US dollars, that's okay. You can change the currency option to your local currency, and it will also display all those results using the prevailing currency exchange rates. Now, here, if you already have a situation where you have a price change, but your PCB layout's already been completed, well, what should you do? Well, what you need to do is sort by package. So here, in the specifications view, there is an option to filter and sort by different packages, by number of pins and number of circuits. And so this is going to be the fastest way to find a part swap that's going to fit within your existing design and really reduce your effort that you're going to need to modify the design in order to get the design into production. So I normally use the case and package option when searching for an alternate using an incomplete part number. You may find that the specifications that you pull up are going to differ by these different packages. However, LM358 is one example of a common part where the pinouts match across different manufacturers. So you're going to have pretty good luck finding an alternative part from a different manufacturer that's going to fit this case or package size. That's not always the case with all parts, but this is one of the first places you should start when you're looking for a suitable alternate that's going to hit your price target in a PCB layout that's already been completed. Another option that you can use here is if you select one of these parts and you navigate to the parts page, you can also look at the alternates. So alternates will appear in two places. Now, I think most people are familiar with the alternates view, and we'll show that here in just a moment. But one thing that Octopart does is it sometimes shows alternates in these sponsored ads. And you can see an example of this parts ads will right at the top of this page. So these sponsored ads categorize some of the parts as drop-in replacements. So these drop-in replacements have been qualified as a suitable pin for pin substitute for the part that you're looking at. And so you can see right here, we're looking at LM358M from On Semiconductor. Here we have an alternate that's been shown to us from Texas Instruments. It's LM358BIDR. That is going to be a drop-in replacement. And that is a very useful tool up here. It is an ad. I know we all don't like to see ads all the time, but this one right here is a drop-in replacement. And so it's always nice to know that a drop-in replacement is out there ready for you to use if you're searching for an alternate component. Now, I think that's really important on this part because as you can see here from this little red dot, the life cycle status is shown here, and this particular LM358 component is obsolete. So sometimes it helps to actually look at the obsolete parts on the parts pages. Sometimes you'll see this little ad here, and it's going to show you an available drop-in replacement. Now on the parts page, we also have this alternate parts view, and all you have to do is scroll down below the list of distributors and you'll see the alternate parts area. Here, you can see in this table that some of the specs are broken out so that you can do a quick comparison of some of these alternate parts to this obsolete LM358M. And then you can open all of these parts up and do a direct comparison, make sure that they're going to fit within your spec. One thing that's really useful here is, of course, in this very top row, you can see we have price broken out, and you can see some pretty significant differences in price across these different components. Here, this original part is 80 cents. We can get it down to 14 cents, and we can get it as high as $1. All of the specs here are reasonably close matches. And of course, this gives you everything that you need to fully evaluate these alternates and select one for you. So now let's shift gears for just a moment. In the previous view, we were looking at an example of an obsolete part. That's the LM358M, but that's just one part. And of course, in your bill of materials, you might have multiple obsolete parts and not even realize it. Now, of course, the industry moves very fast. It's impossible to keep up with all of the part change notifications that can come out as an individual designer. However, the BOM tool does give you a very quick way to quickly spot some of these life cycle changes in your bill of materials. So if you go into the BOM tool and you upload an Excel file of your bill of materials, you'll be able to see here that there is a column that says life cycle. And within this column, you can see all known life cycle statuses in the design for the parts in your design. So here we have one part that's already called out as being obsolete. We have another one that is NRND, so not recommended for new designs. And then we have another that is EOL, or end of life. We have others that are marked explicitly as production. This essentially means that Octopart has confirmed through the manufacturer or through a distributor that these parts are in production. Sometimes the life cycle status is not known in the BOM tool. That's okay. We're able to quickly see some of these obsoletes or EOL parts and figure out a replacement now before we start to put the design into production and before we start creating orders with distributors. So one way to quickly find a potential swap for this obsolete Murata part is to just open up the parts page for this part and then look in the alternate parts area. So if you go over here to this column with the part number, you right click, open it in a new window, you're going to open up the parts page for this part number. You can then scroll down and look in the alternate parts area. Now within this alternate parts area, there could be other parts that are also end of life. Of course, sometimes a design is a legacy design, it needs an end of life part. So sometimes these do get suggested within the alternate parts area, but it also brings up some alternates that are in production. And so you can see some examples here in these columns in the alternate parts area. Now, once you've identified a part that is in production within this alternate parts area, I think it's very important to open them up, very quickly take a look at the specs in the data sheet, make sure you can approve that alternate part. And once you can approve it, you can then go back to the BOM tool, add this part number for this alternate part into that BOM, and it'll give you an updated cost and inventory. Now, here you'll notice that, of course, in the original part and the alternate part, you can see that the descriptions match. The descriptions are exactly the same. I think it's still always a good idea just to open up the data sheet for the two parts, take a look at the data sheet, very quickly check the specs do indeed match, and then you can approve it as an alternate part for your design. If the alternate specs don't match, of course, you can always go back to the part specification view for ceramic resonators, and then that can help you narrow down to an alternate resonator that's going to match this spec on the original part. Another option here is you could, of course, just take this entire string for this description and copy it into the search bar in Octopart. And then using the specification view, you can narrow down to some results that are going to match your spec, hopefully match your package or your footprint, and then look at that part further for qualification for use in your design. Now, if you just copy this entire string into this search bar, you might only return this exact result and this alternate since they have matching descriptions. So it's important to maybe delete a little bit off the end of this search string. However, that can help you increase the number of results. And then here you can see we're able to queue into an alternate part from ECS International, and then we can look at this for further qualification and approval in the design. So when the above approaches don't give you a suitable replacement, I think your only option is really to use search and filter. Now, I think there are some common filters that people might use, and they have some different applicable, they have some different situations where they're applicable. So the distributors filter, of course, if you know you're going to order everything from DigiKey or Mouser or Arrow or a specific distributor, use the distributors filter as your first choice. That's going to let you prioritize just your preferred distributors for search results. Case and package, I think these are important if you're looking for drop-in replacements or you need similar package, similar pin count. You're really trying to minimize the number of updates needed in your PCB layout. Supply voltage filter, I think that's also one of the very common ones because, of course, just who wants to add another power regulator to their design just to accommodate a part replacement? So make sure that your alternate part could be compatible with the existing power supplies that are already in your design. Compliance is also very important. For example, if you're selecting RoHS, operating temperature is one that is very useful for finding alternates. Sometimes you design everything to, for example, -40 Celsius to 85 Celsius. This could let you intentionally over-design your product using alternate parts that have a higher operating temperature. And of course, we have interfaces, data rates, and clock rate. Those are really important for digital ASICs and digital processors. You want to make sure that your alternates are compatible with specific logic functions and specific interfaces. So the filters view can be found in the default search tools in Octopart. And if you, for example, type in this string LM809, you type in any search string you like into the search box, you're going to see up here in the upper right corner of the results view an option to add new filter and show more filters. So this is where you can really control your filtering experience. You're not stuck with the default filters that you see here in this scroll bar. You can really control what you're filtering on and get really granular if you need to in order to find a replacement part. Now, if you click on the Add New Filter button, you're going to see a dialog pop up that looks just like this. And you can see in this dialog, we have a lot of different options to go through and select different filters. Now, some of these are selected by default just because LM809 uses all of these specifications. However, all of these different filters let you get really granular on the specifications for this particular part. Another issue that I have experienced directly and is never fun to deal with is when you have an incorrect footprint in the design. Now, we like to do design reviews of a PCB layout in order to identify those incorrect footprints before putting the design into manufacturing. But unfortunately, sometimes the incorrect footprint problem arises after you've already fabricated the PCB and it's being sent in for assembly. All of a sudden, the assembler notices, hey, this package is not going to fit on this land pattern that you've provided, and that's because the footprint in your PCB data was incorrect. So I think this can be one of the most difficult swaps to deal with. Sometimes the footprint could just be for a totally different package, and so you need to search on that different package. Sometimes you don't know what package that footprint is intended for, and so you have to go in and measure the footprint in your CAD data in order to determine which package is going to be compatible. Now, of course, the parts availability view does not always show the recommended pin for pin replacements. And of course, two parts could also have the same specs and package, but they could have different pin naming. So even though you might queue into an alternate in the package that you want that has the required specifications and basically performs the same functions, has the alternate package you need, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be pin for pin compatible. So I think that's what makes this situation so difficult to deal with. Now, it is true that some common chips do have a de facto pin assignment standard. And so one example here is a 16 megabit flash chip. So here I'm showing on the left one example for an SOIC 16 megabit flash chip. You can see here on the right that in some cases, the pin functionality does match up across different manufacturers. And so I'm showing these examples for two different part numbers. There are many other examples that you can find out there, especially for common logic ICs, as well as for some analog chips. Also, for example, op amps do this quite often. So there are quite a few examples where this is the case, where you can find these parts that have really matching pin for pin functionality, even across the same or different packages. So I think if you are dealing with the incorrect footprint strategy and you want to try to narrow down to just a small number of parts that you can qualify, first I think you should start with, of course, a part type search. And this is going to be in the instance where you're not using maybe a common logic IC. You know that you have to find something in an alternate package, but maybe that part that you wanted to place doesn't come in the package that you need. And then after starting with a part type search, you can apply the package filter. You may need to apply the number of pins filter in order to narrow down to a part that's going to roughly fit on that footprint. And then you can apply the most important specifications as a filter. And really your goal here in parts 3 and 4, and you kind of do this repetitively, is to narrow down to just 2 or 3 parts that you can then look through in the data sheets. Once you narrow down to 2 or 3 candidate parts, you can then compare the pin assignments in the data sheets, and you may need to then find something that has some compatible pin functionality, make a plan for rework, and you'll then have to send that to assembly to review and approve that alternate to make sure that they can solder it into the existing land pattern. So this is really one of the most difficult things to deal with because it comes with all these steps, and because of course you have to do some comparisons between the pin assignments between your desired part and the intended alternate using the data sheets. Thanks everybody for joining this webinar. I'm going to hand it back to my colleague to tell you about the next one.
Thank you, Zach, for another insightful webinar. If you are all hoping to continue the journey with the Octopart Edge series, please join us on September 24th, where we'll dive into effective strategies to reduce your bill of materials and BOM costs, or bill of materials costs. This webinar is designed to provide actionable tips and expert insights to help you optimize your BOM management and save on overall project expenses. Feel free to register for this webinar in the follow-up email that will be sent in the next few days. That will also include an on-demand link for today's webinar. So yeah, the next is questions. So let's take a look. The first question is, what would you recommend doing if the PCB is already fabricated with an incorrect land pattern? How can you get that replacement part to work?
Yeah, that's always a really tough one. I think it really depends on whether or not you can tell that the land pattern was intended for a specific package, or if everything in the land pattern is just off and it doesn't seem to correspond to a specific package. I've had assemblers tell me, hey, you gave us an SOIC package, but the land pattern looks like it should be this alternate package. And so you can use that to then do a search. One thing that I've had to do in the extreme case was actually get a little interposer board designed. And so I designed the interposer board to fit onto the land pattern that's existing, and then the intended package gets mounted on top of it. Now, you can do that from overseas really quickly. You know, you could go to JLC PCB, get that done for, you know, maybe 20 bucks. they'll send it to you. You can have the interposer in about a week. So it's not the end of the world if that happens. There are some creative solutions you can use in the case where Octopart doesn't give you an alternate that's going to work for pin. You can still figure out a way to get that part onto the board, even if it means fabricating just a little interposer board. So I've had to do that in the past as well.
Great, sorry about that. The next question I see that we have is there a search tool or database where someone can find pin for pin part replacements?
Yeah, I wish there was. And there isn't really. I think over time, as you use some common ICs, you'll start to notice which type of ICs have those kind of de facto pin assignments that I described. You know, flash chips is just one of many possibilities. I mean, there are I/O buffers, level shifters, you know, any of the 7.4 series logic, op amps, you know, muxes, those kinds of things. A lot of those parts do have de facto pin for pin assignments across different vendors. I'm not sure why or how that arises. You know, I'm sure there are historical reasons for it, but you know, they're out there. So short answer to the question is no, there isn't a database that I know of specifically. If somebody knows of one, get a hold of me on LinkedIn and let me know, because I'd love to, you know, shine some light on it. But I'm hoping that it will get developed in the future, because it is definitely going to be very helpful. Now, of course, you noticed, as I showed earlier in the presentation, sometimes Octopart does show you specific ads that are drop-in replacements. So they do exist, they are out there. Manufacturers, I think, are getting good about using that as a marketing tool to show you alternative parts that are drop-in pin for pin replacements.
Great. It looks like that's all the questions for today. So if anybody has any further questions or wants to ask us anything directly, please contact us at contact@octopart.com. And we really appreciate everyone's attendance. And Zach, very much appreciate your presentation today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.